Welcome to the deep dive. I'm really looking forward to our mission today because, well, we are exploring the culture, the history, and really the pedagogy of teaching movement. We are pulling insights from a fantastic resource, the Pilates Teacher's Toolkit by Jennifer Morley. And I want to set the stage right away here. Even if you have been teaching Pilates for 20 years and you know the reformer like the back of your hand, the tools we are discussing today are going to shift your perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we aren't just breaking down the mechanics of a roll-up, we are looking at the environment in which those exercises are taught. We're talking about the psychology of leadership, how to cultivate genuine presence, and the historical context that shaped this entire method.
Right. And it's so much bigger than just fitness.
Exactly. So whether you're a coach, a mentor, or leading a team in an office, there are massive aha moments here. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the hidden forces that shape any room you walk into.
It's the perfect starting point, really. Because in any teaching or leadership environment, there are unseen dynamics at play. Morley refers to the most fundamental of these as the lens. And we all have one, whether we recognize it or not.
Yeah, I found this concept so relatable. The lens is basically, it's this invisible filter that dictates how we view our work and our clients. It is shaped by your age, your socioeconomic background, your family history, maybe past injuries you've dealt with, and your personal values.
Right.
Sometimes we're aware of it, like looking through a magnifying glass, but usually it operates like contact lenses. You put them in, you completely forget they are there, and you just assume everyone else sees the world exactly the way you do.
Which is exactly where friction happens.
Yeah.
I mean, if you leave your lens unexamined, it distorts your interactions. A great example of this from the text is the phenomenon of the difficult client.
Oh, yes.
Every instructor or coach has encountered someone who just rubs them the wrong way. And usually our instinct is to blame the client's personality.
There is a really specific scenario outlined regarding a highly anxious client. This person was constantly seeking reassurance during their sessions, always obsessing over whether they were doing the exercise, quote unquote, right. And the instructor found this behavior incredibly draining. But I want to pause here because instead of just labeling the client as needy, how does examining the lens change that entire dynamic?
It requires the instructor to turn the focus inward. In this scenario, when the instructor actually took a step back to analyze her own reactions, she realized that she had been a very high anxiety, overachieving kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she grew up feeling like she had to get straight A's and do everything flawlessly just to be validated.
Yeah.
So her entire adult life had been a process of trying to unlearn that obsession with perfection.
So the client was basically holding up a mirror to the instructor's own past trauma, or at least her past struggles.
Precisely. Seeing that same frantic need for rightness in her client triggered her own underlying anxieties. Once she recognized that her frustration was actually about her own history, her own lens, the entire relationship shifted.
The frustration dissolved into empathy.
Exactly. She realized she couldn't just give the client physical cues. She needed to reframe the goal of the session entirely.
Moving them away from this idea of an external, perfect right way to do things and guiding them to find the movement that felt right for their specific body on that specific day.
Yes.
It completely transforms the professional relationship. And, that level of self-awareness naturally bleeds into how you lead a room, which brings up a really interesting framework for leadership styles in the studio.
What's fascinating here is that leadership in a Pilates studio, or frankly any small business, isn't a monolith. People assume you have to be the loudest voice in the room to be a leader, but Morley maps out several distinct styles that bring completely different energies to a space.
Right, and instead of running through all of them, let's look at a few that really stand out. You have the scholar, the visionary, the buddy, but then you have the coach, who is very goal-oriented. They set a clear objective and drill the skills to get you there.
Right.
Then you have the co-creator, who is constantly checking in, reading the room, and adapting the session based on real-time feedback from the client. And then there's the drill sergeant, who demands excellence through very direct, uncompromising instruction.
I think most of us naturally default to one or two of those. And the challenge is recognizing that different clients need different styles. I mean, a client recovering from an injury might need the co-creator, while an athlete prepping for a season might thrive under the coach or the drill sergeant.
I will admit, when I get stressed or overwhelmed, I definitely default to the drill sergeant. It is totally a defense mechanism. I just want to control the room.
It happens to the best of us. But there's a great tool mentioned for developing beyond your default, and it's called Spot It, Got It.
Spot it, got it. I love that.
It's a brilliant piece of advice from a veteran teacher. The premise is that The leadership traits you deeply admire in others are often the exact traits you already possess internally. You just haven't consciously cultivated them yet.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. If you are drawn to the depth of a highly intellectual teacher, what Morley calls the scholar,
Yeah.
you likely have that same capacity for deep analytical thinking. You just need to give yourself permission to step into that role.
But stepping into all these different roles can lead to serious burnout. I mean, you might be the visionary owner of the studio in the morning, the empathetic co-creator for a private client at noon, and then you have to put your drill sergeant hat on for a massive group class in the evening.
It is exhausting.
How do you manage that transition without feeling frantic?
That is where the mindfulness practice of changing hats becomes essential. It sounds incredibly simple, but it is a highly effective visualization technique for preserving your energy.
Let's make this tangible for a second. Say you are at the front desk, dealing with a broken spring on a reformer, handling a scheduling conflict, and worrying about payroll.
The usual chaos.
Right. You are wearing your manager hat, your focus is on efficiency and operations, but then your 2 o'clock client walks through the door.
If you don't intentionally shift your mindset, you are going to bring that operational stress right onto the mat with your client. They will feel that frantic energy.
Yeah, they always know.
They do. The changing hats practice requires you to take a physical breath and consciously visualize taking off that administrative hat. You leave the stress of the broken equipment at the desk. Then you visualize putting on your instructor hat. It's a boundary-setting exercise for your own brain, allowing you to commit to being fully present with the human being standing in front of you.
And if you extrapolate that individual energy management out to the entire staff, it shapes the broader culture of the space. There's a vital distinction made in the text between implicit and explicit values in a studio environment.
This is huge.
Implicit values are basically those unspoken, we just do things this way, norms.
Which are notoriously exclusionary. Relying on unspoken norms means that whenever a new instructor or a new client walks in, they have to play a guessing game to figure out the culture.
Right, trying to read minds.
Exactly. It breeds confusion and usually creates an in-crowd and an out-crowd. On the other extreme, you have rigid rules handed down from management, which can feel incredibly stifling. The healthier alternative is establishing co-created community agreements.
These agreements cover everything.
Yeah.
You have operational agreements, literally how the team handles scheduling or how they expect the equipment to be cleaned. Then you have relational agreements, which are so crucial.
Definitely.
How do we communicate with each other? How do we handle gossip? How do we give feedback? And finally, pedagogical agreements, which ensure that even if one instructor is a drill sergeant and another is a co-creator, there is still a unified, safe standard of instruction across the studio.
And the key word there is co-created. When the staff, the instructors, and the management all have a seat at the table to define these values, people take ownership of the culture. It moves the environment away from a dynamic of conformity and toward genuine connection.
That's a great way to put it.
There is a reference to Brené Brown's research here that captures this perfectly. Fitting in requires you to change who you are to be accepted by the group. Belonging allows you to be exactly who you are, and you are accepted because of it.
That is the ultimate goal of any movement space, right? You want people to feel deeply at home in their own bodies and in the room. And looking at how environments shape the method brings us to a major pivot point. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Well, I'm ready.
Let's look at the man who started it all, Joseph Pilates, because his method was entirely forged by his environment.
His history is a masterclass in adaptation. To understand the Pilates method, you really have to understand the cultural and historical forces that shaped Joseph himself.
A lot of people picture Pilates as this pristine, modern fitness trend that emerged from a boutique studio in California. But Joseph was born in Germany in 1883. He was a frail child, suffering from asthma, rickets, and rheumatic fever.
Yeah, he had a really rough start.
He was determined to overcome his physical limitations, so he threw himself into the German Turnverein movement.
The Turnverein was a massive physical culture movement in Germany that focused heavily on gymnastics apparatuses like the pommel horse, parallel bars, and rings.
Which you can totally see in the equipment later.
Exactly. It was largely a societal response to the Industrial Revolution. As society became more mechanized and sedentary, there was a fear that the human body was deteriorating. Joseph absorbed that philosophy of reviving the physical body, but the true crucible for his method happened years later. during World War I.
He was living in England when the war broke out, and because he was German, he was interned by the British as an enemy alien on the Isle of Man.
Imagine the conditions there. You are in an internment camp. People are demoralized, many are injured or bedridden, and disease is rampant. Being interned could have broken him. Instead, he turned the camp into a laboratory for his ideas on physical conditioning.
This is where his absolute genius for invention shines. He was working with inmates who were stuck in hospital beds, completely unable to do traditional exercises. So he started taking the springs off the beds and rigging them up to the headboards and footboards.
Just brilliant.
He effectively created resistance training machines for people who are flat on their backs.
That is the genesis of what we now know as the universal reformer. And using springs instead of dead weights is a crucial distinction in Pilates.
How so?
Springs provide variable resistance. The tension changes as the spring stretches, which forces the deeper internal stabilizing muscles to engage throughout the entire range of motion, rather than just relying on superficial muscles to heave a static weight.
That makes a lot of sense. So he was securing patents for these incredible apparatuses like the foot corrector and the reformer throughout the 1920s. But then comes a massive turning point.
Right.
In 1925, the German government asked him to train their new army, the stormtroopers. Joseph wanted absolutely nothing to do with the looming war or the toxic political climate, so he packed up and left for America. And on the boat to New York in 1926, he met Clara Zoyner.
You cannot talk about the history of Pilates without talking about Clara. She became his partner in life and in business, and she is largely the unsung hero of the method's longevity. Their dynamic is a fascinating study in contrast.
Total yin and yang. Joseph was notoriously brusque. He was direct, he was loud, and his teaching style was heavily influenced by his background in boxing and gymnastics. It was an intense, rigid discipline. Clara, on the other hand, was deeply patient.
She was the one who observed everyday clients coming into their New York studio people who weren't boxers or elite gymnasts and realized that the rigid exercises needed to be adapted.
She saw the gap.
Yes. Clara introduced the concept of modification. She figured out how to make Joseph's brilliant but intense concepts accessible to a typical body dealing with typical aches and pains. Without her adaptability, the method might have remained a niche conditioning program for extreme athletes.
And the method continued to evolve based on the people who practiced it. Joseph eventually started working at Jacob's Pillow, the famous dance retreat in Massachusetts, alongside dance legends like Ted Shawn. This is where the method really transformed, right?
Absolutely. When you introduce a boxing-influenced conditioning program to elite dancers, they are naturally going to infuse it with their own physical vocabulary.
Of course.
The proximity to these dancers brought a new emphasis on flow, rhythm, and seamless transitions to the practice. It softened the rigid, percussive edges of Joseph's early work and created the holistic, fluid method we recognize today.
So what does this all mean for someone actually stepping onto a mat or a reformer to teach today? That evolution from rigid mechanics to fluid, adaptable movement leads us directly into the alchemy of pedagogy and presence.
Pedagogy is the art and science of teaching. And at the absolute center of effective pedagogy is the instructor's presence. It is not just an abstract, feel-good concept. There is actual neurological science behind why your presence matters in a studio.
The science of mirror neurons is fascinating. Basically, these are brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that same action. It's the monkey see, monkey do part of our brain.
Exactly.
When a client watches a fully engaged, focused teacher demonstrate a movement, it literally lights up the motor pathways in the client's own brain.
Furthermore, when a teacher is mindfully present, it acts as an anchor for the client's nervous system. It lowers the client's cortisol levels, bringing them out of a stressed, fight or flight state and into a parasympathetic state, the rest and digest mode.
And learning happens better there.
Much better. Motor learning and deep physical integration happen far more efficiently when the nervous system is calm.
But maintaining that level of presence is hard. We all hit the rut. That feeling where you are teaching on autopilot, counting repetitions while mentally making a grocery list, completely disconnected from the work. When you hit the rut, Morley suggests doing a support report.
A support report is a necessary audit of your own well-being. It asks you to look at 3 distinct areas. First, your physical needs. Are you sleeping? Are you hydrated? Are you dealing with an ignored injury?
Right.
Second, your intellectual needs. Are you bored? Do you need to take a continuing education workshop to spark some inspiration? And third, your emotional needs. Are you holding on to resentment because you haven't set proper scheduling boundaries with your clients?
You cannot pour from an empty cup. Once you have audited your needs and restored your presence, you can actually design sessions with intention. A good Pilates session isn't just pulling random exercises out of a hat.
Never.
There are distinct frameworks for session design, and I want to look closely at 3 of them from the text that I think change the way you approach a workout. The first is designing a session around a theme.
Thematic design is incredibly effective for motor learning. Instead of jumping from one random muscle group to another, you pick a central concept, for instance, proper pelvic stability.
Okay.
You then weave that specific concept through various exercises, from lying supine on the mat to standing work, so the body encounters the same challenge in different orientations until the pattern is truly learned.
The second framework I love is creativity, which is all about the flow and the transitions between movements. It is treating the transitions as exercises themselves.
Oh, that's the best part.
Yeah. For example, instead of stopping, resetting, and starting a new move, you creatively link the 100, that vigorous foundational breathing exercise that warms up the core directly into the teaser, the intense V-sit balance that challenges everything you've got. Finding a seamless way to bridge those two creates a completely different challenge for the mind and body.
And the third essential framework is focusing on fundamental movements. This is a session designed entirely around resetting the body. You strip away the complex, acrobatic choreography and take the client back to the absolute basics.
Who is that best for?
This is particularly effective for highly trained athletes, like a heavy weightlifter, who comes in incredibly tight and braced. You use the fundamentals to help them release chronic tension and restore deep functional mobility.
Having these frameworks gives you a solid plan. You also have frameworks like level of difficulty, exploring potential, and exercise diversity. But sometimes you walk into a session, the client lies down, and the plan just doesn't work.
It happens all the time.
Their body isn't responding, or they're mentally blocked. This brings up my absolute favorite concept in the material, the side quest.
The side quest requires a high degree of intuition. Just like in a video game, where you temporarily leave the main storyline to solve a smaller puzzle, a skilled teacher recognizes when a client is stuck.
Exactly. You pause the grand session design you spent an hour writing. You improvise. You find a different prop or try a completely different tactile cue just to clear that specific roadblock in the client's body. Once the tension is released or the connection is made, you seamlessly return to the main goal of the session.
It's important to note, though, that this intuition and creativity must always remain anchored in professional reality. The material emphasizes that a Pilates teacher operates within a very defined code of ethics and a specific scope of practice.
Right. A Pilates teacher is an expert in movement, not a medical professional. You do not diagnose injuries, you don't prescribe physical therapy, and you certainly don't offer psychological counseling, even when a client starts venting to you on the reformer.
Which they will do.
They definitely will, but your job is to promote overall health through mindful movement. Knowing exactly where those boundaries lie actually frees you to be incredibly creative within them.
It establishes the safety and trust that are the bedrock of any successful practice.
When we pull all these threads together, the history of how this method evolved in an internment camp, the implicit culture we create in our workspaces, the science of our own physical presence, it all boils down to how we show up for the people we are guiding.
Absolutely.
Whether you are adjusting springs for a client or leading a meeting in a corporate boardroom, your awareness of your own lens and your ability to foster genuine belonging are what make the environment transformative.
This raises an important question, though, as we look to the future. We've explored the history, but how do we carry a deeply human physical practice forward in the modern era?
That is exactly the thought I want to leave you with. There is a quote from Joseph Pilates from the 1930s where he warned that rapid social and scientific progress was going to result in a society that was overly intellectualized and totally disconnected from the physical body.
He saw it coming.
He saw it happening a century ago. So I want you to mull this over. In our incredibly virtual, screen-addicted, AI-driven world today, will movement practices like Pilates become the ultimate form of rebellion? How will our approach to teaching movement have to evolve in the next 100 years to keep human beings tethered to their physical bodies?
It is a profound challenge for anyone teaching movement today.
It is the work of a lifetime. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Pilates Teacher's Toolkit. Keep examining your lens, establish those community agreements, and stay present. We'll see you next time.